I've not heard.
I hadn't started a live stream just to get things going.
Okay. Six. 5:59.
It should be fairly straightforward
Okay.
tonight.
Sir. Six.
It should be fairly straightforward
Okay.
tonight.
Yep. Yep. That sounds fine. Okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah, no, makes perfect sense.
It's the next work session.
Do you want to go over the changes on the agenda or do you need to?
Would be, yeah, March 11th, March something.
Unless I told her differently. so.
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
Yeah, everyone. It's 2 weeks from today.
Yeah, it'll be 2 weeks from today.
Also, the
Counselor
25th?
Smith, I left a little pull out there at your red folder.
I'll be here.
Oh, thank you.
Wife's father's funeral.
Yeesh. It's an evening work session, it's not all day thing, right?
Oh, it's just an evening. It's, you know, our regularly scheduled.
You missed the retreat. Although
We got a
you,
little bit of it on
Yeah.
via Zoom.
Tuesday the 24th,
And I had to
6
go
o'clock.
pick up some people at the airport, so I had to leave early.
And I do have that as a, city administration report to go over the tentative schedule. So
Okay.
work sessions. So
Perfect.
We'll talk about that.
So we'll all get it tonight.
Yep, it's in there,
Okay.
Good ones too.
in the handout.
Did you email the city administration?
I did not.
No,
I will do that after. I'm sorry about that. I did not get it done until about
About
3 o'clock.
Yes, and no, and there's about everything.
Said
at the
about
end
a
of the
month
meeting,
for
we'll
the
send
back.
it all.
Yep, yeah, there's a variety of things. We'll go over them and then we'll send out to everybody.
Alrighty,
Okay.
I just wanted to check because I didn't see it.
Yeah. I always have optimistic intentions of being able to get that out there.
No, it's all right. I just was double checking since I didn't see it.
Counselor Bowman, you just keep him on his toes.
I know, it's good. I need it.
Well, I'm hardly ever on my toes. So somebody had-
Well, you keep him on his. That's your job. Tammy, you tell me when you're ready.
Let me find my microphone.
Yeah,
All
at
right.
least I'm on four or
Sharon,
something.
or do you have
Oh, I have it. It's right here.
Okay.
Want it?
Counselor Smith, is your mic on?
Now,
I couldn't tell for sure.
only way I can think.
Oh, Ellen, would you do me a favor and scoot my mic closer? It's a little far away. Thanks. Yeah. These things are tricky sometimes. I don't know what the accessibility is like in that building.
Not great. There's a ramp on this side.
We are good to go.
I will now call the March 11th, 2025 City Council meeting to order at 6:03 PM. Tonight's meeting is being recorded and also live streamed. We'll start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag, of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sammy, would you do roll call, please?
Yes, Mayor Bell,
Present.
Counselor Lehman,
Here.
Counselor Wells,
Here.
Counselor Bowman,
Present.
Counselor Engelbretson,
Here.
Counselor Smith,
Here.
Counselor Myers.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And thank you all for being here. And welcome back, Counselor Wells. We have missed you.
Thank you.
But you have participated by Zoom and we do appreciate that. So hopefully you've kind of kept up with all of the happenings here. The first item on my agenda under mayor's comments is the Child Abuse Prevention Month proclamation. And this is always one that is near and dear to my heart, having been a pediatric nurse for years. And knowing that child abuse and neglect does not have any economic barriers or boundaries, can happen anywhere. So I'm going to read the proclamation. Every child is a precious and unique gift who deserves the security of a healthy home. We all have the responsibility as individuals, neighbors, community members, and citizens of Coburg to help create healthy, safe, and nurturing experiences for children. Preventing child abuse and neglect is a community value that depends on the involvement and education of citizens throughout the community. Safe and healthy childhoods help produce confident and successful adults. Child abuse and neglect not only directly harm children, but the trauma can also increase the likelihood of health problems, alcohol and substance abuse, and continued family violence and criminal behavior. Effective child abuse prevention programs succeed because of partnerships among social service agencies, schools, faith communities, law enforcement agencies, and the business community. All of us. We acknowledge that we must work together as a community to increase awareness about child abuse and contribute to promoting the social and emotional well-being of children in a safe, stable, and nurturing environment. I, Nancy Bell, Mayor of the City of Coburg, do hereby proclaim April 2025 as Child Abuse Prevention Month and call upon all citizens, community agencies, faith groups, and businesses to increase their participation in our efforts to support children and their families in living safe and healthy lives. Therefore, preventing child abuse and strengthening the communities in which we live. Proclaimed this 11th day of March of 2025. Thank you all for participating in that. Our second proclamation tonight will be the Arbor Day proclamation. This is Coburg's 26th year as Tree City. Yes, we can be tree huggers. Coburg is recognized annually by meeting the Arbor Day Foundation four requirements: having a tree care ordinance, dedicating annual community forest budget of $2 per capita, Arbor Day observance, and maintaining a tree board or committee. We meet all of those, and we're very proud of our trees. Our trees not only are the lungs of our city, they also provide great beauty, and they actually act as traffic calming devices. When you have lots of trees and things to look at, people slow down. And we think that's it. So in 1872, Sterling Morton proposed the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees. That special day became known as Arbor Day, and it was observed by the planting of more than 1 million trees in the state of Nebraska. That's hard for me to believe, having driven through Nebraska, but okay. Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world. Trees can reduce the erosion of precious topsoil by wind and water, lower heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce oxygen, and create woodlands and habitats for wildlife. Trees are a renewable resource, giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products. Trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. In keeping with the spirit of Sterling Morton's dream, I, Nancy Bell, Mayor of the City of Coburg, do hereby proclaim April 25th 2025 as Arbor Day in the city of Coburg. And I urge all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day and support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands. And I urge all citizens to plant trees to gladden the heart and promote the well-being of this and all in future generations. This is proclaimed this 11th day of March. Plant a tree if you have room, and only if Brian says that it's in the right place. And if you've gotten a dig, have all of your utilities identified. But other than that, plant a tree. And we always involve our Coburg Charter School in the Arbor Day celebration, and they help us plant trees. And there's a great picture in our packets of those students, and it looked like it was a very rainy day last Arbor Day that they were planting, as I recall. But they still had smiles on their faces. That's great. Sammy, do we have any proposed agenda changes to the agenda?
We do, Mayor. Agenda item number 7, the resolution 2503 for the council rules of governance will not be presented tonight.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 11 for the police department quarterly report. That report was in your red folder and can be added to your packet at page 59. Agenda item 12 for the finance quarterly report will not be presented tonight. And then your city administration report will also be, it's in your red folder and can be added to page 60 in your packets.
Thank you very much. We look forward to going over those. Do we have anyone signed up to speak tonight?
We do not.
Next item is the consent agenda. I'll remind counselors that you can remove an item from the consent agenda for discussion by requesting such action prior consideration. Yes.
Madam Mayor, at this time, I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. We have a motion by Counselor Bowman to approve the consent agenda as presented, and a second by Counselor Wells. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? No. The motion passes unanimously. Our next item on the agenda is a special guest, and we have Mr. Abora here from Lane County, or Lane Travel.
Travel Lane County.
Travel Lane
Yeah.
County. I knew I could get it if I just tried hard enough. Thank you, Andy.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor and City Council. It's our pleasure to be here. One of the things that we get to have the pleasure of doing is travel throughout the county to all of our communities and provide reports. And I should say I'm Andy Vabor. I'm the Vice President of Stakeholder Relations. And this year it's been extra special because we hired a new president and CEO. And our former CEO was with us 28 years. She was superstar in the industry and still in the community and started her own business. So we're still tapping into her knowledge and expertise. But we're really excited to have our new president and CEO, Samara Phelps. And Samara is here with me tonight. And so rather than listen to me, I'm going to have you listen to Samara and let her take it from here.
Welcome and thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Andy, for that warm introduction. Thank you, Mayor and councilors, for the time this evening. It's a great opportunity for me to introduce myself. As Andy said, I'm Samara Phelps, President and CEO for 6 months here at Travel Lane County. Thank you. Thank you. And I am filling in behind an exemplary leader in the industry in Carrie Westland. So it's really been an honor. I am actually a boomerang. I was born and raised in community and actually was part of Travel Lane County before moving out and being in Clackamas County as CEO up at Clackamas County Tourism for 9 years. And then now I'm back. And so I spent 8 years at Travel Lane County, some of it here at the Antique Fair, in the outreach role, being a part of the community in that way. And then now I'm back in the CEO role. So it is, today's presentation is an opportunity for me to say hello and introduce myself, but it's also a chance for us to highlight some of the work that was done under the previous leadership in the fiscal year 2024. So for those of you that may or may not be familiar with Travel Lane County County's work is an investment of transient lodging tax, the county's transient lodging tax, often referred to as TLT. So I will probably drift in and out of use of acronyms. Anyone can stop me at any time. In countywide economic development, and it helps to grow a vibrant year-round economy countywide by increasing the overnight stays here in the county. Our board and staff work for the well-being of the community and the industry with an eye on programs that serve both residents and visitors, making this a great place to live, work, play, and to visit. So in your packets, I believe you received the full annual report in its printed fashion, maybe. So what we're going to do is do the highlights here from what's on the screen. Okay. Not in the packet. That's
I
totally
don't think
fine.
it is.
Totally fine. We'll speak to the highlights that are on the screen in front of you then. And we're starting with some basic industry health
Could I ask
metrics.
If the television could be moved closer.
Sure, we can do that.
Thanks, Sammy.
Thank you.
So overall, the health metrics for our industry show visitor spending, which is a key indicator of our industry's impact on community at $1 billion during the calendar year of 2023. And that's the second consecutive year that we've topped $1 billion in spending. So what does that mean for us as communities? What that is $1 billion spent by folks who live outside of our communities by 50 miles or more in local businesses, restaurants, and shops throughout the entire county. And those are dollars that are supporting the businesses that make our communities thrive. So visitor demand was strong, though it didn't top 2022. But if you might recall, we hosted a pretty big event during 2022 with the World Athletic Championships. So we're both in our community coming off of a record year, but also the industry. So a slight softening in visitor demand is what we're seeing across most markets. Doesn't seem to indicate much about our individual market. Next slide, please. Thank you. Great. So I talked a little bit about that softening demand. You see that in the occupancy numbers for hotels and short-term vacation rentals, which short-term vacation rentals are one of the primary overnight stays here in Coburg. And at the same time, you see that rate and therefore revenue was up. That's because there was some pretty strong rate gains in what the daily rate would be. So that visitor spending is the impact in our overall community and our health metrics from an industry standpoint. The most timely information we get is around the lodging. So we spend a lot of time talking about those lodging numbers, knowing that somebody who stays overnight is likely to spend more money in the community. So what you see here is strong but slightly softened numbers. Again, not anything that we're particularly concerned about, but certainly information that we track. Next slide, please. So room tax collections are that key performance indicator. And you'll see in the graph at the bottom that there's a pretty steep increase in transient lodging tax growth, which in 2023, the county, Lane County, added 2 points to the transient lodging tax here. So we see growth that is both created through that administrative action, but also there's real growth in terms of demand and those rates that we saw being charged for the hotels. So transient lodging tax in the fiscal year 24 that we're talking about today was $29 million in revenue throughout the county. And Travel Lane County receives $4.2 million of that to do our county-wide tourism marketing and development. The remaining $25 million is used by individual communities and the county to support specific tourism efforts, including a distribution from Lane County to the city of Coburg. The chart on the left is one that I want to point out where you see that wave that happens. We have a significant dip in demand in winter. So we're not earning transient lodging tax the same over the course of the entire year. We are, as they say, making hay while the sun shines. And then on those rainy days when we're planting trees for Arbor Day, there's a significant dip. So what we're working on doing in our work is trying to drive winter demand to uplift that. So we have a more stable economy from a visitor perspective. That's more stable revenue for businesses. It's also stable employment for our staff that are employees that are staffed in those businesses. So the graph that you see is the spikes that happened when we had events happening in the winter. So these are from weekend events of volleyball tournaments that were hosted. And this really highlights for us the fact that we could benefit as a community from a multi-use indoor space that can host sports tournaments. So wherever that happens in the county, that's going to help all of us in the county drive some of that winter demand. Next slide, please. Okay, so now's a chance to dive deep into the work that we actually control and do in our community. And that starts with the superpower, which our superpower is storytelling. As destination marketers for Lane County, we continue to make gains in the destination awareness and the reputation building through data-informed strategies in paid, owned, and earned media channels. So what you can see here is that we have achieved some amazing exposure in fiscal year 24 with 66.8 million impressions for target audiences that drove 314,000 clicks to the website. And in overall, we achieved 1.7 billion, that's with a B again, impressions for the destination. So this is folks driving awareness about Eugene, Cascades, and Coast as a place where you can come visit. Next slide, please. A big part of our work is doing convention and sports sales. So we had 2 great industry conventions that we were able to host here in the fall, which were great alignments with sustainability and inclusion. And I just want to do a call out to the community at large that many of the events that you travel for into communities, whether that's for association work, it's for reunions, it's for your professional groups, those events could be hosted in Lane County as well. So if you know a group that is looking for a place to host their events or their meetings, please do encourage them to consider Eugene, Cascades, and Coast, and also reach out to our staff. We're here to help sort through that for you. But overall, we worked with 87 convention groups in fiscal year 24 and confirmed 32 pieces of business that represents 5.4 million in economic impact for our community through those conventions. And then sports. I talked a little bit about the power of sports and that we hosted some big events at Hayward Field, and we saw that in the TLT. But we have a proven track record, little play on words there, for hosting world-class events. But the sports here is not just track and field. We do support a strong track and field base. This is an incredible opportunity for our community, but we also work to deliver the same level of exceptional experience for youth, recreational, and professional athletes in a wide range of sports in communities across Lane County. And this past year, we were able to book 21 sports events overall for an estimated direct spending impact of $36 million in the community. And this is going to be another big year for track and field. We have an amazing season lined out that starts this month. But we have highlights happening with the 50th anniversary of the Prefontaine Classic happening on July 5th. So that's happening right here in our community, welcoming professional athletes. And for the first time, USA Nationals for track and field are going to be hosted at the same time, same venue with the Para-National Championships. So we're really excited to welcome those into community in the middle of summer. All right, so Traveling County's work is really founded in partnership and collaboration, and our work is done in service to the community. So we've made a few changes. Andy's team has had a chance to do some really exciting things, including we changed our partnership model to include a level of membership that is free and available to any visitor-facing business. So if you are a business operator or you know someone who does operate a business that's visitor-facing, encourage them to participate with Travel Lane County as well. So that's really great, improving access to the benefits of our work. We were also recognized for our work on hearing loops with a national award, and we supported the placement of all-terrain mobility chairs in partnership with Lane County Parks and David's chair, which is a track chair, to provide access to both Florence for beach access and at Mount Pisgah for trail access. And those are available for visitors and residents to use. Great, destination development. Our mission is to drive those overnight stays and to ensure that this work is responsive to the communities we serve. We work in collaboration with community groups. Here in Coburg, that's your Main Street organization. These connections are opportunities for us to learn and share local insights and data to support the most impactful and aligned work between the community and Travel Lane County. And this year, the destination development work was extra rewarding as the Ofter-Heide was on its path to Scenic Bikeway designation. So you guys are part of the Willamette Valley Scenic Bikeway here. So you're the OGs in this. And in actually November, so this current fiscal year, it was officially designated as a Scenic Bikeway. We also worked with Connect Lane to route some signage work to route a route between Cresswell and Cottage Grove and Cresswell to Eugene, connecting our rural communities through cycling routes, which is an exciting for us because building on that cycling destination supports that past work that's been done, like here in Coburg with the bike-friendly community work, as well as the Scenic Bikeway. And then organizationally, we're really excited because we established a charitable fund in fiscal year 24. This is the first time that we've had that available, and it's an opportunity for us to support public benefit projects that make this a better place to live and to visit. And so we'll be able to bring to bear both public and private dollars to invest in potential projects. And we're really excited that that could work towards building that multi-use indoor facility in the future. All right. So integrated marketing is basically our website, our brand, and the content that tells the stories of our communities, which is the workhorse of our work, representing these amazing communities that are a part of Lane County. The details are summarized here on the slide, but one thing I want to point out is our engaged sessions were up another 15% for our website, and we had 3.6 million views for short form video, which has been hugely impactful for us. The video here is about the cellar season and wine country. And then the next slide has your Coburg video, which is a community video that is playing as part of a set of reels. Yeah, I think it's live. This plays at baggage claim at the Eugene Airport. Great. So we feel an extraordinarily strong sense of stewardship and a shared stake in the future of Lane County and each of our individual communities. We recognize the strong work of your city staff here, as well as the Coburg Main Street. And I just want to give a shout out to Megan from Main Street. She was a featured panelist at She Leads, Travel Oregon's Women in Tourism and Hospitality event this last week. And it was really exciting to see your community represented so well with an amazing advocate for both the industry and the community. The slide here that you just saw speaks to other activations. We have your content on our website. We also have you represented in our visitors guides, which we'll have set by the door if you want to copy. And we always welcome feedback on those. So if you have ideas or suggestions about what could be included in the future, please do reach out to our staff. And I want to remind folks that we do have an asset library of images that are available for free. So if people are looking to do some promotion individually with your community, you can access our assets to do that. And with that, we can go to that slide that has that long list of board members. And I just always want to make sure that I include our countywide governance board that oversees our work. Our staff are the ones that execute it, but we really do it informed by the list of individuals here. And they work to serve the county at large. And I just want to make sure that we acknowledge the work that goes into building a destination for the entire community. And with that, I just thank you again for the time. Happy to be back in community and able to work with you in the future. And if you have any questions or comments, I'll take those right now. From council.
See any, but thank you so much.
Yes,
for
thank you
being
so
here
much.
and
We'll
sharing
see you
this
again next year.
information. Yes, yeah, this is very exciting. Next agenda item are ordinances, resolutions, and contracts. And we'll have a public hearing for the first reading of ordinance A 234-A, an ordinance granting to Hunter Communications, Inc. a non-exclusive franchise and right to construct, operate, and maintain a fiber-based service facility, occupy city rights of way, and to provide fiber-based services in the city of Coburg, and repealing A-234. I will open the public hearing at 6:30 and hold the first reading on the ordinance of A-234A. And Mr. Hanks, would you like to give us the overview on that, or the staff?
Sure, yeah, excuse me. As we've been talking about over the past few months, we've been working through a variety of franchise agreements that were either had expired or were ready to expire. And this is kind of, I think this is number 3 on our list. And we have EPUD, the electric utility, coming not too distant future after this one. So we're just kind of running through franchise agreement updates. They're typically either 5 or 7, sometimes 10-year terms. This particular one, we felt it was matching the prior, which is a 5-year term. Telecommunications can change fairly rapidly. I think a shorter timeline is better. I've seen 10-year franchise agreements more commonly with solid waste and recycling franchises, a lot longer, different sort of capital replacement and all of that kind of stuff. So this is a pretty normal term for a telecommunications franchise. We had our legal staff at LCOG help us with a review of this, added quite a number of things. Really nothing flashy, but really good substance content to add to it that are kind of best practice that Hunter, was acceptable to them as well. Just some clarifiers in the staff report. On page 2, there's a bullet list of 7 or 8 items that were amended from the prior franchise agreement. Some insurance endorsement stuff, just kind of crossing the T's on that. Construction standards, what happens if they vacate or abandon their facilities and equipment, what just explicitly that becomes our right and abilities. Some stuff about during construction when we have projects, how their response to our public right-of-way projects work. And one that I really like is a requirement that Hunter install facilities underground in any areas where other utilities are already underground. I thought that was a really good add. That can be challenging to, unless you have something explicit, to coerce undergrounding when stringing up wire on poles that are already there is much faster and cheaper. So but long-term, a better plan for us. So, I could answer any questions you might have. It's not a, particularly exciting piece of work, but it's an essential. Franchises are essential pieces of work because we we collectively, the community, and you govern and regulate rights of ways. And what happens inside those rights of ways are really important. And having good documents that lay out what can and can't happen in those rights of ways are really critical. It's all smooth until something goes haywire, and then you lean back on that franchise, and it really dictates the terms of what they are responsible for and what are our responsibilities. So that's it in a nutshell.
Looks like Lane County did a really nice job, or LCOG did a nice job.
Yeah, Jim Cheney took over for Ann Davies as kind of our primary point of contact, and we have used them on purpose a little sparingly, but there's some content that is just no-brainers to run through their legal staff, because they do this work and they're very up to date on what's going on legislatively and other case law and other things related to franchises. So yeah, really appreciate his efforts at helping us out.
Does council have any questions for staff? Do we have any written testimony? I will now close the public hearing at 6:34. Are there any questions or discussions from council? If not, I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve first reading of ordinance A-234-A, an ordinance granting Hunter Communication and Technologies a non-exclusive franchise and right to construct, operate, and maintain a fiber-based service facility, occupy city rights of way, and to provide fiber-based services in the city of Coburg, Oregon, and move the ordinance to a second reading for final approval and adoption.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Councilor Myers and a second by Councilor Baumann to approve the first reading of ordinance A-34-A. The second reading is scheduled for April 8th of 2025. We need a vote on that motion. Yeah?
Yes, please.
So I will entertain, you can approve the motion by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Our next resolution is resolution 2025-505, a resolution adopting the fiscal year 2025-26 City Council framework. We have a staff report by Mr. Hanks.
Yes, thank you. This document is, we spent considerable amount of time at the council retreat a few weeks ago going over this document, which really functions as our kind of the council goals, objectives, work plan, all mushed into one, with a longer term desire to kind of evolve this to a full strategic plan. And so the council framework, we did it for the first time last year. So this year, I took a stab after the retreat of incorporating, kind of changing the content that I provided to you at the retreat. We went over accomplishments for the prior 12 months and planned actions for the upcoming 12 months, gave ourselves kind of a grade about our achievement or progress, and then also set a priority. And so the document here in the packet, it kind of splits that up. It's a different format than how we looked at it at the retreat. So what I did was to enable us to update it every year and kind of build on kind of nest the accomplishments each year in kind of an appendix. The main body was the content on the front page was amended, the paragraphs there. The 5 categories remain the same. The 20 objectives remain the same. The accomplishments component are in the back of the document as somewhat of an appendix, and we'll just kind of build every year the accomplishments so we can kind of record that. What is in the main body of the current what's in the top right, 2026 update is the actions that we discussed that are the upcoming actions to further get some progress on each of these objectives. And then the priority that we discussed is included there as well. And so then on the title bar, the FY25 accomplishments come after that. And then the very last is a page that has just the title of each objective by priority level that we discussed at the retreat. And the final piece to this is last year we, I think, agreed to use it as the kind of the goals and the framework, but we did not formally adopt it by resolution. I think it's smart. Sammy suggested, and I think that's a good course of action to actually adopt it by ordinance, because it really does form the basis for our work plans. It influences the budget preparations, and really is our touchstone for when new things come up. We need to be looking back at this document and sorting and shuffling and downgrading something and upgrading something else to kind of, address the maximum capacity that we have as an organization and as a council to work on all of these items. So that's what's in front of you, is the document with a resolution that more cleanly, formally approves it for our use.
Great idea. Council, are there any questions for Mr. Hank? And I will, is there any discussion? Any questions about anything that we discussed during our initial review of the framework and objectives? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve resolution 2025-06, adopting the council 2025-2026 framework.
I have a motion by Councillor Baumann. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Second. by-
Mayor,
Yep.
we want to note that was resolution number 5, not 6, as was stated in the motion.
Thank you for that correction. Do we need to restate that?
Wait, that it
I think it's on the record.
Okay, thank you. So all those in favor, say aye.
I
Any opposed or any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Next, we move on to council action items, and we have the budget officer appointment and the staff report from Sammy Egbert.
Yes, I think most of you guys have seen this before. Oregon state law requires that we appoint a budget officer annually, or that you appoint a budget officer annually. And the budget officer's responsibilities include preparing and supervising the proposed budget document, publish required notices, compliance with Oregon budget law. The budget officer works under the direction of the mayor as the executive officer. In our 2022 charter, that we added the city administrator position into the charter. If you guys remember, one of the things in the city administrator's task was to coordinate and supervise preparation of the preliminary budget for submission to the mayor and administer the budget and adoption. So it makes sense that our city administrator be appointed the budget officer for 25-26.
Just at the resolution process just matches us up with Oregon budget law, even though it's in our charter that way, which is interesting and good. This just closes that loop, that we meet Oregon budget law explicitly with the resolution.
That's where I got the number 6 from.
Just got a bit ahead there,
Yeah.
huh? Are there any questions for staff? Any discussion? This is great that we're sort of aligning charter, public law, Oregon statute, so thank you for that. At this point, I will entertain a motion to appoint the city administrator, Adam Hanks, as the 2025-26 budget officer.
I move to appoint City Administrator Adam Hanks as the 2025-2026 budget officer.
We have a motion by Counselor Smith. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Baumann. To appoint City Administrator Adam Hanks as the 2025 budget officer. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. And now we are moving on to the city. The administrative information report, is that right?
Actually, the University of Oregon Community Survey.
I'm missing something here.
Yeah, we put it under that heading. So you were in the right general heading.
Was in the right
Yes,
place. I
yes,
just
you
haven't
were.
got all of my
Yep.
ducks lined up here. Haha, ducks. Sorry, guys. So we get to welcome 3 students from University of Oregon who have been instrumental in getting our community survey done. And so I'll turn it over to you and you can tell us who you are and what you found out.
I need 2 minutes.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay.
Maybe I'll just say a few
All
words
right,
while we're
thank
doing
you
that.
so much.
Thank you, Mayor and counselors, for having us. My name is Aniko. I am one of the instructors that supports the Real World Lane County class that this project came through. So I work at the University of Oregon in the School of Planning, Public Policy and Management under the Institute of Policy Research and Engagement. So many layers down, but one of the things our institute does is the Rare AmeriCorps program. So you all should be familiar with that since David is serving with Coburg in part of his time. And it's really exciting for us that we get to partner with communities and want to thank Lane County for sponsoring the funding that helps make projects like this in our rural communities happen. And it's a great experience for, in this case, our undergraduate students. We have other courses and other work that focuses on graduate students, but we have undergrads, which is super exciting for us that we're able to offer these applied projects for them that both help our communities learn something new and help build up the skills of our students who are about to go out into the world and get jobs working with local governments and things like that. So thank you so much for having us. And it looks like the slides are up. So I'm going to turn it over to this awesome student team. Thank you.
We're excited, so thank you.
Good evening, Coburg City Council. My name's Jimena. I'm one of the students who's working within the 3 p.m. real world class. These are my colleagues, Michael and then Holden over here. We are the students in the 3 p.m. 410 real world who have been doing the city of Coburg's community survey. Can you go to the next slide, please, once you can? Okay, I'm gonna go over the agenda. So we're gonna be going over the introduction, which is the next slide. And then we're gonna go over the survey, community engagement, and as well as the conclusion and like Q&A time, so you can ask any questions that you may have. And if you go to the next one, thank you. So we conducted a community survey. Oh, the next one again, so sorry. Okay, so we conducted a community survey looking to develop knowledge on values, experiences, and needs of the community of Coburg, investigating community engagement outreach methods, as well as to inform the strategic plan development in the near, current, present, like future development. The impact we hope this project can have is inform you, the Coburg City Council and staff, about community perceptions of city services, resources, as well as identity gaps in services and programs for residents. So it'll be just a good informative presentation. So if you can go to the next slide. Okay, so some methods that we we conducted a community survey in order to assess values, insights, opinions, and priorities of Coburg residents. We compare respondent demographics to census data to identify underrepresented groups in Coburg's planning process. We read case studies of 4 different cities, which is Veneta, Florence, Bend, and Tualatin. And we also identified methods of community engagement that can improve Coburg's outreach. And I will be passing it on to Michael in the next slide. So
here we're looking at the survey and this is the distribution and response rate of the survey. Yeah, so we created and established the survey, shared it with Megan specifically, and she put it out through email as well as your guys's. Sorry, I forgot about the mic. The Facebook page as well. I believe it's called I Love Coburg, and we received 111 responses, including partially completed surveys with a total response rate of 11.8%. And yeah, these are our demographics. This will be followed with graphs. I just want to point out the prominent survey respondents within our graphs, which is seniors, white residents, middle class and upper middle class residents, as well as homeowners and residents living within Coburg city limits. And it's important to note that survey demographics are not going to be fully representative of Coburg's actual demographics. So yeah, first one is race and ethnicity of Coburg residents compared to survey respondents. And in all of these, the survey demographic will be green and the Coburg demographic will be blue. And yeah, our survey is pretty similar to Coburg demographic in the fact that most people are white. We did have 15% of people that did not want to answer, and a total of 70 responses from the survey. This is the gender of Coburg residents and survey respondents. Again, pretty similar. We received more female respondents than male, and this could be because of a few things, maybe just because males aren't as interested in taking surveys or they don't feel like gender is as important to insert within their questionnaire. And figure 3 is representing age within survey respondents and Coburg demographics. We can see it does line up pretty well, except for ages 19 and 34. We only found 9% of survey respondents to be within that age, whereas 17% are representative of the Coburg demographic. And we did have a rise in 35 to 34 ages compared to the demographic itself. And this is the median household income of Coburg residents versus survey respondents. The first thing that jumps out to me is we only received 8% of survey respondents with a median household income of under 50,000. In comparison, it's we had 27,000, or I'm sorry, yeah, it's only representative of 25% of Coburg demographics as compared to 8 in the survey demographics, which is a big jump. And we also looked at the fact that there's a high number of high income residents within our survey responses, whereas compared to only it's 27% of high income residents within our survey demographics and 16%. This only adjusts to 16% of Coburg demographics, which is another outlier within our graphs. Yeah, we also added a home ownership graph. This is again pretty similar. There may be a slight rise in owning responses compared to rent due to the fact that more people owning houses feel more connected to the community. And I will be handing off the key findings to Holden.
Thank you. So for our key findings section, we divided it into 3 categories: the highest performing areas, places where respondents felt the happiest with or felt were doing the best; the lowest performing areas, which was what respondents, felt was not doing so great or could use some improvement; and then the desires of respondents, which were things that they didn't really see in the community or wanted to see more of specifically. So here's our highest performing findings. One of the major ones was Coburg as a place to live. We asked our respondents to rate the quality of Coburg as a place to live on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being poor and 5 being excellent. And 53% of respondents answered 5, and 39% answered 4. So overall, people feel pretty good about it, with only 6% answering 1 or 2. Next, we asked how safe do they feel? And about 49% of respondents felt that they feel almost always safe in Coburg, with 35% feeling that they feel mostly safe in Coburg. So the safety of the community is something that people feel very happy with. And for our lowest performing findings, we found most of these trends from our open-ended sections. So the things that jumped out to us were the cost of water, sewer, and associated fees, the growth in population, the residential construction, and the quality of roads in Coburg. So firstly, the cost of water, sewer, and associated fees was heavily mentioned throughout our survey. And the text is a little small for me. We had increased, people were very dissatisfied with the increased cost during the summertime, despite feeling that they're conserving their resources throughout the year or using less in other seasons. They were also dissatisfied with the additional fees and charges attached to their water bill, such as utility service fees, tree service fees, transportation fees. And with one resident saying that the increase in utility rates was something they were dissatisfied with, but it just feels like something they have to deal with. Next slide, please. Next, the growth in population was something of concern. Residents seem opposed to new growth in general. They would like to keep that small town feel that Coburg has. There's also concerns around expanding the existing infrastructure, whether or not the existing infrastructure could handle new growth, as well as I mentioned earlier, some conflicts with Coburg's small town feel, with one respondent saying that there are too many houses being built and we just do not have the infrastructure for that fast growth. And tying into that, the residential construction was something of concern. Residents are feeling very dissatisfied with rising housing costs, as well as the inclusion of more and more single family units that they feel are driving up prices and bringing in people from outside of the community, further contributing to rising prices. And they're also concerned with some of the new developments just in general, things like higher density housing, such as duplexes or triplexes, with the respondent saying that the increasing housing and pressure for higher density housing is increasing in existing neighborhoods. And lastly, the quality of roads in Coburg was something that people were generally dissatisfied with. Notably, there were lots of issues with potholes and feeling comfortable and safe driving on the roads, as well as a lack of sidewalk infrastructure. People really take a lot of pride in Coburg's walkability, but they wanted to see more accessibility and comfort around maintaining that walkability through their sidewalks. And respondents also felt that many of the roads were just overall low quality or could use some repaving. So, and this is a word cloud that we generated from the question around what's concerning you, and sort of tying back in to those previous slides. Housing and water is something notable, along with growth, utilities, and pedestrians. Also of note was speed. A lot of people feel very dissatisfied with the speed limits that have recently gone into place over these past few years. A lot of respondents wanted to see those removed or changed, and that's a pretty high level thing, but we just didn't have a solid category or recommendation around that, but it was still worth noting. Then just for some smaller additions, things like traffic and the budget, crime, being crowded, just feelings of safety and things like that from those less represented groups that we wanted to include in there. And this was from the desires of some of our respondents of what they wanted to see more of. One of our key questions that we asked was if the respondents were able to control all of the city budget or oversee all the city budget, how would they allocate it amongst the current resources? And then we aggregated that together to generate sort of an average respondent to see sort of how people are feeling resources should be allocated. And out of that average, around 27% was dedicated towards police and police funding, 26% towards transportation projects, around 20% towards parks and recreation, around 12% towards 10% it's current water and wastewater services, 9% towards future water and wastewater services, sort of that idea of growth happening, and 8% towards economic development. Slide, please. And then as well, we also noticed respondents wanting there to be more of certain services that they weren't seeing, Around 50% of respondents suggested seeing more amenities and recreation options. These could be things like just community gatherings, events, concerts, art shows, things like that. Around 27% of respondents also indicated importance towards senior services. Again, as we saw in those demographics, there are a lot of respondents that are in that 65+ category. So many respondents felt it important to see more resources or prioritization towards senior services. Then we also had around 39% of respondents talking about just other things they wanted to see. Some of the prominent ones were an increase in local grocery options. Some respondents felt that they would need to go out of the city to get their grocery needs met. And then the preservation of historic buildings was also something that was important. People really like seeing the small town character and the historical qualities of Coburg preserved. And lastly was, as I mentioned earlier, just some street maintenance and repaving was also something that people really talked about a lot. Yeah, I'll pass our committee priorities and recommendations from this section over to Mike.
These were recommendations that came up through our survey findings. The first one being maintaining Coburg's character. Many respondents were very appreciative of Coburg's current small town feel. They hold a lot of connection to the city itself. And so we recommend preserving historical structure within the city, as well as attempting to implement methods of improving housing or constructing housing that doesn't conflict with Coburg's current character, which is a very complicated recommendation in itself. Another one is improving quality of roads and sidewalks. Repaving roads and establishing safer pedestrian infrastructure towards corridors of concern. You can establish maybe plans as a pedestrian plan, or just simply engaging with residents as a way to understand what and where these concerns actually lie. Yeah, and assessing water and wastewater systems, we recommend examining these current systems and identifying improvements that can be addressed through Coburg's strategic plan. One of these being an increase in funding, but in the previous slide where residents were able to choose where funding should go, they put really little concern towards the actual existing and future wastewater systems, which is important to note. And then also providing more options of food and groceries. This was something that came up quite a bit within responses, and we suggest the construction of a potential grocery store, preferably probably a local one, as bringing a regional store here would prove complicated with the current small town feel of the city. And establishing a grocery store here can promote local economic growth, as well as improving accessibility for local residents and establishing job openings for residents as well. And something that's not on here is establishing police presence, as this was something that was heavily desired for within the residents. I think getting an better understanding of what that actually would look like for a few residents is important to understand as well. And
Okay, so we had the opportunity to meet with 3 different professionals that have experience with community engagement. And we're very thankful to them for their time to be able to talk about their experiences. The 3 people, can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. Okay, so the first one is David Nieto Wenzel. He's a water quality specialist of the city of Coburg and Tangent. And then we had Megan Dompe, who's the executive director of the city of Coburg. And then we have Stuart Warren, who's the associate planner for the city of Eugene. So we're very thankful for their time for those. Okay, if you can go to the next slide. And I wanted to go off of like the first takeaway. So I'm gonna go by each so you can see which one I'm talking about. But some of the main takeaways that I thought were important to think about and consider is, first of all, I forgot to mention this. We acknowledge every interviewee who brought various and important inputs. These are important to think about. These are multiple ideas, but as you will all see, they will come up through the presentation. And the first one is the use direct conversations to be able to get answers to questions. So talking with people specifically. And that can also relate to, if you can go to the next one, please. networking. So for networking, it's also important to do that, to guide yourself to reach solutions, to talk with people. The next one is empathy towards sensitive groups. I talked to David and he mentioned his work with ranchers, especially as like in his work as the water quality specialist. He mentioned how important the land is to them. So they're very sensitive to discuss these issues. So it's good to consider those parts of their identities that might be something sensitive to them. The next one is more consistent meetings. So we recommend from the interviewees to have, to build more consistent meetings rather than only having little contact or like various like over consistent of like 6 months or so, if that makes sense. So having more consistency. And that could include also for the next one, the roundtable discussions, which could be a way to better the consistency of meetings and doing it in different ways. The next one is newsletters and social media forums. And that could be a way to make the information that you all are discussing more accessible with information. And the next one is the demographic analysis to reach underrepresented groups of individuals. As we mentioned, men from the respondents who responded, they didn't select that much. It was mostly female identifying and any other groups. So it's important to consider that. And the last one is uses broad and focused engagement strategies. So that could be a good way to just think about it more specifically and consider all of these different points that the interviewees were discussing. The next part that I'll be covering kind of briefly, you go to the next slide. The case studies that we reviewed. So it was 4 different cities. It was Veneta, Tualatin, Florence, and Bend. And I'll be covering 2 mainly, the city of Bend and then Tualatin. So the city of Bend we found is a useful and wonderful form of community engagement since we were able to do that through the city of Coburg to do the community survey. But we ended up adding it to the appendix so we can have it as an option to see that you can do the community survey, but you can also call to try and get them to get responses back. So reviewing it through that way. And it's very useful to think about it and not just sending the QR code. We can also call, can connect with them. The next one is the city of Tualatin, which I found very interesting because they created a resolution to be able to adopt principles of city involvement. So they really emphasize the importance of effective communication, which is a key part in keeping transparency and thinking about how to get the information to your residents and people who live in Coburg. And I think it's really cool that that's another way to be able to look at that. And I thought it was kind of maybe something that could be considered maybe in the future. But this was like a quick overview. So if you have like any questions, I can definitely answer them. But I'll be passing it to the next slide, I think, to Michael, so you can go over some recommendations about community engagement.
For communications that we found through our case studies and survey findings. The first one is focused engagement. This involves narrowing outreach efforts towards underrepresented groups within survey respondents. And one of these being, we found that 8% of our survey respondents held an annual income of 50,000 or lower, which is not really representative of Coburg's demographic, standing at 25%, along with young adults. And we wanted to use this data to recommend you guys collaborate with local organizations serving low-income residents or finding ways to reach out to young adults, such as tabling at local venues that hold a higher number of these individuals. We recommend collaborating with local organizations such as regional nonprofits or advisory committees that already contain these diverse groups of people. And we also recommend communicating with these underrepresented residents in a really personal way as a way to build quality responses within people who normally wouldn't take surveys. I guess for this survey specifically, as well as we recommend involving an extended amount of community events and meetings throughout the year. I believe you guys hold 4 public community meetings throughout the year, and we recommend this number to jump to 6, where you guys hold a meeting every 2 months. And this can lead to enhanced public involvement process towards current and future city plans or projects. It's a way to engage with the community more, what Jimena was saying about building transparency, getting information out to the community. And other strategies are establishing new and fun community events such as arts and crafts or a bingo or movie night. Or even, I guess, I came up with this earlier, the tree planting event would also work very well for this situation. And yeah, these are just recommendations aimed at engaging with your community more, creating more opportunities for people to voice their own opinions within the city's current and future plans. And yeah.
Yeah, just for a conclusion, we just want to say that as part of the start of this project, we were informed that Coburg is going to be working on a strategic plan in the near future. So we just wanted to recommend that Coburg keep the findings from the surveys and the community engagement and case studies in mind going forward with that process. That's sort of what we oriented many of these towards. And we also just want to say that we are, as students, incredibly grateful for the opportunity to work with the city. And we'd also like to thank Megan for helping us coordinate this and answering many of our questions. So that we're just take any questions, provide any answers that we can, if there are any. Thank you.
Questions from council? Counselor Bowman.
I do have two quick questions because statistics is sort of one of my many wheelhouses. Did the survey findings mirror what you guys generally expected going into this based on the case studies that you reviewed, or was this really sort of surprising to you? Was it as expected, or were there a few head-scratching moments?
I think for me, I definitely was a little bit surprised, but also going in, I didn't fully know what to expect. I guess I'm not going to speak for my colleagues though.
I think I was surprised because I feel like I didn't realize, since I am an Oregonian, I don't think of like small cities to be like this small. So I was just like impressed of the way that we got like good amount of responses for a small city. So I feel like that was like the most surprising part. And it was just interesting to get like all the information put together, because then we got everything that makes sense. So that's what I would say.
No, we're known for being quite active, that's for sure.
I have a few questions.
Oh, Counselor Lemon.
So I'm assuming this was a written survey. How was it distributed?
We actually did this as an online survey. We used the platform Qualtrics to build one that we could distribute.
Okay.
And once that was finished, we provided it to the city, where the city distributed it through their email and social media.
And how did you develop the questions for the survey?
Initially, we looked at some best practices for survey development and also worked with our partners at Coburg to find out what the goals of the survey were, or what they wanted to find out, which mainly was what services were people satisfied with or wanted more of. So we just kind of oriented it towards that. And then also just included a section on demographics, just to get a better gauge of who might be more represented or underrepresented.
And were the survey narrative responses? Were they ratings? Were they scale, combination?
You didn't take the survey, did you?
Did you? Oh, how did you get it?
It was on social media. It, yeah.
You know, I might want to add real quick that the actual survey, the full survey report will be made available to council. They're scrambling. We fit all this amazingly. Fitting this within a one term has been really a push. So congrats to you all for pulling that off. But I think some of those answers will come when we give you the full survey.
Yeah, the survey.
Absolutely. And it does have some of the open-ended questions and all of that. I've seen some of the raw data part, but it's still being organized as I understand it. So our work session 2 weeks from tonight, one of the topics in the work session will be going over the survey in a little more detail. So that provide some context for you. So these were the highlights and these were great. We'll get the full report for the next work session.
Okay. And one last comment, just a little bit of a pushback, because when you said that the underrepresented portions of our community that we could do more to engage them in terms of their non-response to the survey. It could just very well be that that group doesn't respond very well to surveys, as opposed to that we're not doing a very good job of connecting and reaching out that part of our community.
I just wanted to thank you. A lot of information, and it's organized and broken down, so it feels very useful going forward. So thank you. There's a lot in there.
That was a big project for one term.
Yes, it was.
Mayor, if I could add a couple things that I took away from it that I think is pretty impressive, and maybe goes to Councilor Bowman's questions. 111 survey responses is phenomenal for the size of our community. So that's great. And admittedly, primarily online tools to distribute are a challenge to hit all the demographics the same way. But that's why we're, I think the matrix at the end, talking about different types, and we've talked at the retreat about tabling, about other means of getting this. This isn't by no means the only way to get information, but the 111 is incredible, I think. The 4 and 5 quality responses on that, the first graph, either 5 out of 5 or 4 out of 5, very, very safe. It was the terminology. That one to me was kind of the key. What right? The one close key findings. There we go. Oh, we lost it. So basically, most surveys, when you look at those, it's the everything to one side, and it's basically 85% that were either 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 5 that they gave a grade for, both for feeling safe and for their fulfillment of Coburg as a community. So those are pretty really, really impressive numbers, I think, from history of my seeing and being involved in various community surveys. And then, as well as the spending prioritization question that they formulated. There we go. So as a place to live, typically you look at 4 out of 5s and 5 out of 5s, and you add those up to say that you're on the plus side of the ledger. That's a high number to be on the plus side of the ledger for both of those questions. I think that's extraordinary. It might be kind of normal for Coburg as being in the unity and the community sense of place and all that stuff, but in many, many communities, they would be dying to get those numbers. So that's really good. Preserving that and increasing it, I think, is one of our charges. The spending prioritization, having police and public safety be the highest, I think that bodes well for conversations that we had at the retreat and in the future about our general fund, revenue and fund balance conversation. So I think that really says a lot. That doesn't surprise me. I felt it was really good data for us to use going forward. And again, to get to Councilor Lehman's questions about the questions themselves, the goal wasn't to really dive super deep into any one topic. It was really, as they said at one of the earlier slides, is kind of an overview of values, a general sentiment kind of a thing. So we can use some of these pieces. Then as we jump into Parks Master Plan, the Coburg Creek Park development, we will then have some other opportunities to ask much more targeted and focused types of engagement opportunities. This one, by design, was fairly broad, and I would just say that this hit exactly what we were looking for from the staff standpoint. So nice work on this project.
And if I may add, regarding the policing too, that was more, many of the respondents who mentioned that more so wanted to feel the presence that Coburg's police were operating within the city of Coburg, rather than they feel like they don't have police or that it's not safe. There were those responses of feeling not safe or like they're not there. Those were very few and far between.
Yeah, good. And a quick shout out again, you guys mentioned it, but Megan did on the staff side did the heavy lifting for us on this project. So thanks to Megan for helping really shape this and working with the team. I had good intentions of hanging out with you guys more and it didn't happen. So, but Megan took care of it for us.
This is a great starting point and not an ending point.
Right. Yeah.
For community engagement. So thank you. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Lots of really great information tonight. Can't function without a pen, so I have to get another pen. Oh, it's somewhere. I'll find it.
It's
I'll
what
get
we
it.
call
I know.
not valid.
I am the pen queen, queen of pens, whichever, I don't know. Okay, so our next our agenda item is the quarterly police report, and that report is in our red folder. And Chief Larson, are you going to walk us through that report? This is a different format.
Yes, I was just going to give a quick update that we are still catching up on the quarters behind. So yeah, Chief can go over that. But I think we have a plan of attack. We're getting better information from dispatch on adjusting our data for future quarters.
We're trying. What we control, right? Yes. Yeah, so this is third quarter. We owe you fourth quarter for 24. Dispatch had a change in their software program for the dispatch center. So it stopped getting the proper data that we needed on November 22nd. We're trying to work with them with a new CAD system, computer-aided dispatch system, to get all the proper documentation. So this is a quarterly report, one that you've seen before, similar 1 through 9 or 1 through 7 categories as far as traffic stops, patrol checks, person crimes, property crimes, society crimes, warrant arrests, and then all other calls for service. So in the third quarter, we had 462 traffic stops, person stops, which is about 7 a day. So we're trying to address the speed and the pedestrian safety. We hit that pretty hard. That's quite a bit of activity. Patrol checks, 171. Person crimes, 75. And with the child abuse proclamation, we had 10 DHS referrals of child abuse last year, and we have 2 so far this year. I think we have 1 or 2 that are pending. So Cobra is not immune to those type of crimes either. So that would be, all of that would have been under the person crimes category. Society crimes, calls for services was 88. Warrant arrests were 8, and then 140 other calls for service. And then on the bottom of the report, page 2, we always try to list what type of calls we have that we respond to. Disputes, drug overdose, alarm, warrant arrest, disputes, just a variety of crimes that we deal with almost on a daily basis. And I update those every time because they shift and there's different amounts, and then I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Nothing ever happens here in Cobra.
Ever.
Just maybe add real quick, we're trying to give the same quarter prior year. So below the large colored graph is a little table, and you can see, there's end of September 24 versus end of September 23. All columns. This quarter that we're reporting on now was a very busy quarter. A lot of productivity in that quarter. And sometimes that's due to our staffing availability. Sometimes it's seasonal. Sometimes it's just anomalies. But just want to point out that our goal is to try and show you 5 numbers. So it's all 4 plus the same quarter the prior year. So you can really see year to year.
Mr. Lehman.
I think in the past, we've had some statistics that we haven't seen for a little bit, but how many full-time officers now we have and reserve officers?
We have 3 full-time officers right now. I have 7 reserves.
Okay. I think one statistic I've seen in the past that was pretty meaningful was the number of hours per month presence for a full-time and for our reserve officers, kind of see that balance and presence. And then there's some number of days throughout the month that we have no presence of officers in town.
No, normally we just changed shifts, but we used to not have coverage on Sundays because it was the lightest day. So I didn't feel that it was worth it to do Sundays. We've now had a shift change and some personnel changes, but now we're 7 days a week. So every day you have a police officer on duty. The hours vary with what the needs are. I know last week I think Officer Miller got called out 4 times in one night. So it just varies with whatever the needs are for the city.
I think I'd like to see how many hours of reserve officers a month we have and our full-time FTE staff at some point.
Okay.
I know that probably pretty easily.
So it varies with the activity of what the city needs, because some of the reserves don't get a lot of patrol hours, but they help us with all the community events, like the light parade or the antique fair. They just simply couldn't do it without the reserve program, because they help, like with the light parade for traffic control, they need at least 4 to 5 people minimum. And then sometimes on the full-time side, it might be on days off or vacation, which we try to not schedule during community events. So it's kind of hard to track. I could do it. But that's a lot of times.
For a lot of work.
Yeah, but that's how the reserves help the program and the police department. And then I do have several reserves that are putting in quite a few hours in traffic enforcement in Harrisburg. So which is always a help. But yeah, I'll be glad to provide whatever information I have.
In 30 days, are we averaging 6 hours daily, 8 hours daily, 12 hours daily?
Well, for the reserve program, you're getting probably 30 to 40 hours a month of patrol time.
So what?
Maybe we can refine your questions a little bit and get into that.
Yeah, I'll be glad to provide whatever information we need.
Just trying to make sure what is being asked and that it's something that the full council wants, because that is some workload to come up with. Are you talking from?
Thought if you had that information.
I mean, we could generate something from timesheets, but it does vary quite a bit about people on vacation, people out sick. We had workers' comp. I'm not exactly sure how telling, we could try and figure out, really trying to figure out what the council is looking for from is it an overall hours output per month or type of work, or is it answered enough with reserve versus, paid staff? I guess maybe we need to figure out what we're looking for.
Let me work on that.
Okay, yeah, let us know.
Yeah.
Because we could chase it. I don't want to chase something that isn't exactly what is useful
I like
information.
that it shows what kind of activities that we're doing. I'm just trying to, knowing what the 3 full-time officers and what 7 reserves you said.
Right.
How that really translates in terms of a presence in the community. In terms of how frequently are they on duty in the community. And
Well, that may be answered, if I may, that may be answered by more of the shift differential that has just changed.
Yeah, I think it's a good attempt at altering the shifts to maximize kind of how we get our coverage. And then of course there's on call, and really getting down to that hourly stuff is a challenge in pulling timesheet records and formulating that. It's there-ish. I mean, it's there because we pay people, right? But how that's recorded and how refined each of those hours are may not be super telling. So I'm trying to figure out what's that right level of detail that gets you what you need. But yeah, we can come up with what we have more readily available to, I think, get at what you're talking about.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a volunteer fire department. When you need them, they come. And so that's really the benefit of the reserve program. So they're not out because they all have full-time jobs. It's just like the volunteer fire department. But when I need them, they come out to help.
I also think that there's a danger in being too specific, in that if we want to know exactly how many hours are covered, then there's people out there who look at it the other way and realize how many hours aren't. So I think that we have to be careful on how specific we get with the hours that our police are present, because that also sends a message to people who may not have the best intentions. So
Yeah, and I think what we're all getting at is kind of trying to define and measure and monitor service level. So we'll talk about how we can augment this that we're doing here to provide something that gets at that service level question, because I think they're something that's not too difficult for us to pull together.
Chief Larson and Administrator Inks, I certainly don't want to create more work for either of you. I promise I'll be nice. However, I would certainly like to know if you could quantify, is there a certain time of day or day of the week that generally tends to be our busiest or our quietest, or does that vary from time to time, or?
It varies. Sundays have historically been quieter, but there's always outliers where we're busy on a Sunday. So there's really no way to anticipate it. If I could, I'd be a millionaire. Because it ebbs and flows. You just never know. It's not typical to have 4 call outs in one night, but it just happens with whatever the needs are for the city. So we have 24-hour coverage by somebody being either on patrol or on call. So tonight when I go home, I think Officer Miller's on call. If we get a dispute, he's coming out. If we get a DUI call or a traffic crash, he's coming out. So really it's whatever the needs are for the city. So there is no during the summer, normally Fridays, Saturdays, people are getting off, they're drinking a little bit more, they're in the park.
Kids are out of school.
Kids are out of school. I mean, those all have influence, but there's really no pattern.
Well, in a way, that's a good thing, because if it was quantifiable, I think we'd have a problem that we need to address.
Yes.
Other questions for Chief Larson?
Just one other follow-up. What was our highest level of reserve officers? I thought it was much higher at 7.
I had 10 at one point in time, and then they ebb and flow, and some of them, like Officer Wicks retired because he was probably 70. So, and then another one that was a safe investigator, used to be full-time at Lincoln City. He's moved up in his position as a safe investigator. So they kind of come and go, just like any volunteer program. So.
Great resource.
It is a great resource.
We're very fortunate. I know that your reserve officers are very loyal.
Yeah.
And stay for actually quite a long time.
They actually do.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that means that you take good care of them.
Yeah, and OSP hired 2 of them previously, so that's a problem.
That speaks well.
Springfield's probably after him now. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, finance quarterly report.
That one we will bring
We'll
back
put on hold.
in the future. Yeah.
Okay. And then we have the administrative monthly report.
Yeah, I'll go over a few items and then we'll see.
I don't have that in front of me.
So the first item is just an appreciation. Just want to get it on the record, the extra time spent by mayor and council on a Saturday, really important. It's super helpful from a staff perspective to get alignment on kind of our bigger picture stuff, and especially some of those conversations about that long range stuff. I thought it was very useful. I don't know if it's still on the wall, but it'll be there's more to come on that stuff that we whiteboarded on that is in the framework, but it's not as explicit as we'll come back around to some of those items. I just thought it was great, great content. The second item, I've talked a little bit to some probably about, and I've had some internal emails. We've trying to make sure we're paying attention to the kind of current status of the federal funding world. Pretty chaotic, up and down, unpredictable. It always is to some degree in a change of administration. This is a little more extreme. What we're doing is just every project that has the potential to be connected to federal money, we're checking in and saying, okay, how is it vulnerable? If so,
when and how is it vulnerable? So this bullet list is really, we're in very low risk. The programs or the projects, the federal funding being remaining stable and solid and accessible. Coburg Loop Path was probably the one that was on the fence for a bit. They had to, City of Eugene is managing that project for us as a certified agency. They had to really push and get a component of that project submitted to avoid it falling off the funding deep end. So appreciative of Sean, is the guy in City of Eugene Engineering. He put that project on the front burner to beat the clock. So that one's still alive as far as we know. Water loans are partially federally funded, and those we got confirmation from Business Oregon that that's very secure and solid. Carolyn, who really does a great job for us, kind of assured us that that's looking good. We were worried about putting out to bid the remaining water projects if those were susceptible. It does not appear to be. We'll keep monitoring that. Coleman Collector Street, phase one, that's an interesting one that it was federal funds and then a jurisdictional exchange occurred. And so that's actually, as I noted, funds in hand, that's cash in the bank. So it may, if it didn't happen that way, it may have been susceptible, but it's not. We have it. So we're really solid on that. The solar system is an example of probably a few things that we'll see coming that were pending potential grant opportunities that might, evaporate either temporarily or permanently. And that's not super uncommon. We just have to be mindful that some of those grant opportunities depends on where those funds came from originally. They may or may not be as planned on or planned for as we originally thought. The ODOT truck inspection is another one. It's hard to know sometimes what stuff is actually federal that we don't even realize it's federal funding. And so that one, we're just double checking everything. That's a revenue side that we do some billable hours work on truck inspections. We have a police officer who's certified truck inspector. So there's a bunch of things like that that are very small ticket items that may still have some either delays or, a winding path on federal funding. But for the takeaway is that we're in pretty good shape, and a lot of those are it's still in courts. For the cities that are really monitoring that stuff, the courts are deciding whether those funds get dispersed or not, and we're not really in that position. We talked about this one, number 3 at the retreat. Just wanted to kind of get it on the council formal packet record, not just the retreat record of the S&P Global. That is our credit rating that was downgraded, and that's really a reminder of our upcoming work in budget and beyond for fund balance targets and developing a revenue and expenditure combination plan that builds those fund balances back up. We have the double challenge of having operating expenses higher than operating revenues, and we need to put more money into fund balance targets. So that's kind of a double challenge, but just wanted that to be on the record there. The next item, we hit on this a little bit. A few of you did before the meeting started. City Council work sessions. This is a draft schedule. We're hoping, the topics may change, but this is our goal. I added the 2 budget committee meetings in there to kind of round out your roster of meetings that are beyond the second Tuesday of every month. We can, we'll send these out. Oh. Yes, that's a 29, not a 19. Thank you very much. Yes. Yeah. Oops. Thank you. Yeah, those are 2 weeks apart. Yeah, that was the goal. Not 4 days apart. That'd be brutal for everybody. So the topics I already talked about. The one in 2 weeks from now, the Coleman Street Collector project. We want to run the plan sets. They're about a 60%, close to being 90%. We may not have that by the work session, but we'll have a very good working set of plans for you all to be familiar with before that goes out to bid. And then we'll talk more on the community survey. And then an item that I had kind of scribbled for bringing up at the retreat that is somewhat time sensitive if there's a desire to move forward is, it came up at the last minute last year, was any sort of a fireworks ordinance. If we're wanting to do anything on that topic, it really has to get up and running in April to be able to have first and second reading and all of that. And that is that's just a question from staff to council of, do you want to entertain that? And we'll talk about that at the work session. But something to be thinking about, and some cities have bans, there's different types. There's trade-offs to all of that, pros and cons. This isn't a plug for doing it. It's just, if council's interested, we would need to be able to have it in place before the 4th. We would need to really start taking action in April. The future ones we've talked about as well at the retreat, utility capacity and master plan updates in June. July, we just had a kind of a prep meeting for this. These might flip between June and July, but Lane County Transportation presentation on jurisdictional exchange of North Willamette and Pearl. They haven't been shy about bringing that up in a lot of our meetings over the past year. We've been talking about it from a staff standpoint, kind of poking holes at the kind of the what's in it for us kind of questions. I think we've kind of exhausted the staff to staff conversation. I think it's valuable for council this isn't an ask necessarily for the county. They just want to come and present. I think we both want to have council just be familiar with what a jurisdictional exchange is. How does it work? What's in it for us? What would it cost us? All of those kind of things. So it's really just conceptual, educational, no immediate follow-up action necessary. Just so we know. And staff's pretty familiar, but we want you to know, and we also want you to hear it from them also, as well as our input. So that's on the docket. And we did talk a little bit about URA, kind of lining up September to really kind of talk about where the URA, the urban renewal, stands now. What are our kind of legal options moving forward, and what are the timing for those options? Just to prep, again, there's no imminent decision there. It's still active for a few more years, but I think it's prudent for us to just get familiar with that topic, because it will be rising up in priority next fiscal year to ramp up. If we want to do something significant rather than just close it out, we need to be planning, 12, 18, 24 months in advance probably to line that up. And it also will require some consultant work. So we'll need to budget for that as well. If we just close it out, that's a more simple route, but we'll go over all of that this fall, just to make sure that's on everybody's mind. And then in October, we're hoping to have just a conversation about advisory committees and commissions, and just what are our kind of the bylaws. Is everything kind of working the way we want it to work? Are we, as council, getting what they expect out of it? Is the community getting what they expect out of it? Are the participants of the committees getting what they expect out of it? Basically a check-in of, is it working as intended? And again, no, that's not any sort of Trojan horse for any plan changes. It's just an open conversation to kind of see what we might want to do with that, if anything, in the following year, rolling into 2026. So that's kind of the layout. Again, preliminary, and obviously quorums are important. If we don't have quorums, we don't have the work sessions. So, Sammy and I will work with the mayor, and we'll as they get more firmed. We definitely are hopeful that there's a quorum and availability for 2 weeks from today. The others, we'll check in and firm this up at a future date. The last item on there is sorry.
I don't mean to cut you off,
Nope.
but I did want to, because I didn't see it listed, any of more firm plans about getting LTD out here? Is that going to be their own work session, or is that going to be incorporated in another topic as well?
The kind of the preliminary plan or thought for that is more of an open house setup. So not a work session here, and maybe even having it at the Commons possibly, or we can still host it here. But yeah, it would be kind of off cycle of this, but yes, it's still in the works.
Okay, great. Just double checking, since I didn't.
Yep. Good. Yep, that's a good one. That'll be
More of a community meeting than a
Right.
council work
Yeah.
session.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're talking with Megan Dompe about Main Streets involvement, kind of triple sponsor, city, Commons and Main Street possibly to have and maybe even the Community Foundation. So the last one there on psilocybin prohibition, as some of you that were on council may recall, there was an ordinance passed that was allowed to be done. State law had a provision that allowed cities to prohibit psilocybin for a period of 2 years. That has expired, that ordinance. So the question, or maybe not a question, but at least an early staff statement is, and the mayor can add more. She's actually quite a bit more familiar with this than we are at staff side, of whether or not there's a need or a desire to put an ordinance forward to re-prohibit that for another period of time. Maybe I'll just turn that over to you to what you've learned and engaged from some conversations.
As you recall, this isn't the way that Oregon is closely monitoring, mandating, and licensing the use of psilocybin in controlled clinical settings, like any other class, what is it?
Schedule 1.
Class C drug. It's not, I want to remind you all, it's not like, a corner pot shop. We're not talking about that. It would be in a clinical setting. So as we realized that our temporary ban was expiring, I reached out because the only area in town that it could possibly be used would be at Serenity Lane. So I reached out and had a great conversation with their CEO, Pete Kearns, and they are not at this time planning on utilizing it. But he said that could change in the future. They're looking at efficacy, and he also said it is so tightly regulated that it's very expensive for people to be trained and get licensed.
I'm sure, yeah.
So based on that, he said, well, it would be nice if we didn't put forth a ban, if we just sort of let it lie, but he would go either way. At this point, they're not planning on using it, but they might in the future. Yes,
If
Councilor
we
Smith.
don't ban it, are they then going to be mandated by the state to provide it?
No.
But
It is a
choice.
clinical decision
Okay.
whether it is utilized or not.
And
It would seem reasonable that we just let the ban expire and.
That was kind of the default, and we just wanted to make sure that was out there and open for discussion, that if there is, if any counselor has some, some real reasoning why that they have pause or concern, or that creates risk in their mind, we could revisit that. But as of now, that is expired, and someone could do that under those other regulated conditions. So I did include something from OHA just as a handout, because it's always handy to know what it is, what are the services, just kind of gives a primer, a 101 about psilocybin. And as the mayor said, it kind of came about very somewhat commingled regulatory wise with a lot of the marijuana stuff, and medical marijuana, recreational, and local taxing of marijuana, and the state taxing of marijuana, and what you could and couldn't do. So I think it's very easily crisscrossed and confused. But as of now, I think from what Mayor gleaned, I feel comfortable that it's very low risk. And I did run that by Jim Chaney, the LCOG legal, and his take was the same. We have a legal ability to re-ban it, but we're not required to. And his take was that many communities aren't. That was an initial thing. While the administrative rules were still being worked out, many communities did do the ban. So that was probably a prudent thing to do that time, because it wasn't known what the clinical settings and the licensing and how that would work, because that was still being done at administrative rules. So just wanted to make sure that was known to everyone. And then the rest of the report is kind of some of the productivity and activity from the departments that we can answer if you have any questions. I had one item that I didn't get in the report that I think we can probably best squeeze into the work session in 2 weeks. There was 2 meetings of the revenue subcommittee since the retreat, or maybe only one. Anyway, there's been 2 since the utility rates, and the subcommittee now is, as you recall, we had 3 kind of chunks or 3 phases of that subcommittee's work. The first has been accomplished already with the utility rate review and recommendation. The next chunk that the group finished just last Thursday is mostly the general fund recommendations on the revenue side. And then the next piece after the budget process starting in September, October will be kind of more of the bigger, gnarlier type revenue streams that take ballot measure or are much more involved and require a lot more research and deliberation. So I have to hand out if we want to get into that recommendation tonight, or I can make sure that these are in the packet for 2 weeks, because the recommendation by itself isn't super meaningful unless we kind of walk through the PowerPoint that I presented to the subcommittee that helped them before in meeting 1, before they did their recommendation last week. So I would hesitate to kind of talk about the recommendation without having a conversation, at least summary level, about the PowerPoint. So up to council if we wanted to take a run at it, or if we want to. A few of the slides you've already seen. It's from the overarching, fund balance conversation that kicked off the utility rate conversation. And the slides are going over a list of 6 or 7 possible, kind of the more common potential general fund revenue options, pro and con of each. It's 10 or 12 slides, maybe 14.
We have about 10 minutes
Yeah.
before 8. So it's your choice. We take a look at it tonight. This would just be a look at it. We would not be deciding anything.
Right. Yeah. The recommendation will actually be on the April agenda for a resolution. So the process would be a resolution for the recommended fees in April with an effective date of July 1, which then if there's a desire to not make that decision in April, you could make that decision in May. But that's at least the kind of the master plan layout of how the subcommittee was breaking the topics up into chunks.
Which time are you looking for tonight if we did it?
We could do as much or as little as we want. We could just go over the
15 minutes.
Yeah, 15 minutes max. You want to do it? Okay, let's get the handouts.
Doesn't know what we were saying now.
No.
Keep one. Thank you.
It'll just be a tickler with more to come.
So if we could, we'll save the top pages, the actual recommendation. So we'll save that one for the end instead of the first, but it doesn't matter too much. But
page would you like?
So yeah, if we start on, again, I'll just kind of whip through the PowerPoint, starting with the February 20th date. So that's the title page. The arrow graphic, I think hopefully you won't get tired of it, but I think it really is a good reminder about what we're shooting for. Financial survivability, moving forward to sustainability and ultimately resilience. That's kind of the overarching goal and target. The revenue needs indicators, this is what we talked about in the utility rate conversation about the different elements that really help us evaluate why we have revenue problems in the various funds. No fund has problems in all 6 categories, but we did go through that exercise with all 4 funds, those indicators. The next page is a repeat again of a slide that we saw in the utilities. This one is, I bolded the red, which is the general fund, which shows it's the lowest balance fund, and it's on a pretty slow glide down. So it's been relatively flat, but on its trajectory down over time. So the indicators, the summary, we can just worry about mostly the general fund here. The driving need for this conversation is the really low ending fund balance. And if you recall, the S&P Global, rating drop was really, that kind of proves that point out for us. General fund is where 9 of our 16 FTE, our full-time equivalent employees, reside in the general fund. So PS is personnel services. We're going to have some pretty steep escalations in personnel services for our 2-year PERS rate just came out. So that'll be, when we talk budget, that PERS rate, we experienced a good increase for this next 2-year period. As well as healthcare increases. So we'll be seeing personal service escalations, and the general fund is where over half of our people are funded and live by requirement. And then CIP, while it's the least of our issues out of the CIPs and the 4 funds. The Park CIP lives in the general fund. So those are the kind of the reasons for having the conversation about revenues and hopefully some of the justification for the reason to put in the tough decision of potentially adding some new fees. So the next page, it's got the bullets that are boxes. Those are the revenue options. And I have a slide for each of those, so we can probably just, that's the list, and I'll talk about the highlights of each of those the next slide. So the first one is local options levy. Key piece there is it requires a ballot measure. That isn't a decision of council, that's a decision of the community. It requires renewal every 5 years. I put an asterisk down there. Capital levies can be 10 years, but we're talking about operating levies, not capital levies for the general fund. A positive is the revenue collection is managed by Lane County. It comes through with property taxes. It's not a task of ours to collect, and it distributes directly to us. The operating challenge of an operating levy is, even if it does get passed, in about 3.5 years after it gets passed, you have to be gearing up to get it passed again, or you have to plan for going without that revenue stream. The operating levies are good because they do generate probably larger sums of revenue than the more nominal utility fee would. I mean, obviously you could charge a very high utility fee and come up with the same revenue numbers, but it's a different, it's looking at it's a different mechanism. Councilor Bowman, did you have a question?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I was gonna ask which parts are we looking at? Maybe doing the operating levy for?
Great.
What would that be for?
Yep, thank you. I missed that part. Typically, it would either be a parks levy for operations and maintenance primarily for the system, which would free up general fund money that is going to parks now. We would free that up for public safety, or conversely, an operating levy for police services, public safety, which then conversely, opens up revenues for the general fund for parks and other services. So it would typically it'd be for one of the other, and some of that is honestly a polling or a survey strategy about which is a more palatable to get a yes vote on, which makes the more sense operationally. From a management standpoint, probably the parks levy would be easier. That's easier to dial. If we didn't get it a second time, we could dial parks a little bit easier. It's a lot harder to dial a police department because it's really people. So when you dial it down, if you don't get it the next term, the next 5-year period, you are cutting staff.
I get slightly nervous when I hear the word, vote.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I get very, not that I'm gun shy to do it, but I'm an odds maker, and that always makes me a bit nervous.
Yeah, and that is a big deal for, planning for it and expecting that to be a revenue stream, building future budgets with that in mind. And it may, again, it's not a decision of council. So if it doesn't get a yes vote, then we've spent a good amount of time gearing up and prepping and having for that typically the May general election. And if it doesn't go the way you expect or poll or hope, then you're back to square one and you've lost a bunch of time.
It would also be incumbent upon us as counselors to have those conversations with our community members. So all of the work doesn't just lie with staff on a ballot measure. It really lies.
In a lot of ways, not much can, we can do the factual work. We cannot do any advocating legally. That is not a staff option. So we can provide factual answers and that's it. And then put out material that is, often in bigger cities, you'll see a PAC will end up being the promotional arm for that. There'll be a small group that collects funds and actually does mailers and all of that. Most of what you'll see is that does not come from the city when people are doing these. It's from a group.
Because it can't.
Because it cannot, right? Mhm.
But it is.
But
it
people
is
don't realize that.
Something that we
Yep.
thinking about for the future.
So the next two slides are very similar. Maybe exactly. Yes, the bullets are exactly the same because they have the same attributes. It's just a matter of which one you want to apply it to: a parks and open space fee or a public safety support fee. And the fees on utility bills are the most common around the state right now for dealing with general fund shortfalls between revenue and expense. That is by far the most frequently utilized tool. It is able to be established and adjusted by council via resolution. The resolution establishes kind of the nexus between the collection of the fee and what it's used for, and then how we track that. And it's collected via our utility bill system. And just as a marker, we talked about this before, but every dollar, a $1 fee on a utility bill generates about $10,000 of revenue annually. So if you have a $5 fee, that's $50,000. Just as a point. And again, this has similar to the operating levy that a parks and open space fee versus a public safety support fee, they accomplish nearly the same thing. It's a matter of what makes the most sense to the community about what they're willing to have a line item payment, for. Again, I lean towards parks as being slightly better, but many cities have a public safety support fee of some type. Many have both. It depends, and some of them are in the $20, $30 a month range. Not uncommon. These are also in order of magnitude, pretty much as we go through these. The local options levy has the most revenue potential, and it just kind of stair-stepping downward as we go. Local lodging tax, it is restricted by how it is able to be used. 70% is required to be used currently for tourism, and only 30% of whatever we raise would be able to be used for whatever we want in the general fund. We need to check in with our Lane County finance folks to see what that does to if at all, to how we get our allocation currently for lodging tax. We get a very small lodging tax that I'm still verifying how elective that is by the county to divvy that out, because we get this share of a pot that's a share of another pot. We would just need to verify that we wouldn't want to have a new tax that subtracts from an existing revenue stream. Don't think that's the case, but just wanted to list it. It is collected and managed by the Oregon Department of Revenue, so that's from an administrative purpose, that's pretty good. The annual revenues are very seasonal. You saw that from the presentation tonight. That's not uncommon at all. Talk about peak season, shoulder seasons, dead seasons. That is very cyclical and hard to manage on a 12-month period when revenues go. You can do it, but it's that's a component of that revenue stream, and it's really small. I think it's a smart thing to do for us to be thinking about and putting one together. I don't see it as a general fund revenue solution. I see it as a smart contributing revenue stream for diversification of our revenue streams, and doing it before we have the volume that I see, that we see coming potentially into the future. I think it's smart to have one in place. I don't see it as solving our fund balance issues. Food and beverage tax. I came from one of the two communities in the state that have a food and beverage tax. Ashland had it starting in the 90s. Yachats was soon after, I think, very shortly after. Many other cities have tried. They have been shot down at the voters. Jacksonville has, Madras, many. There's a handful of other cities that have tried that. A lot of them get to the idea stage, and the business community, rails about it. And I lived that for about 30 years, about the pros and cons of a food and beverage tax. I put in there, it may not legally require going to the ballot. I think that's debatable. I haven't figured that out for sure yet. But even if it isn't required, it always is done. I think it would be very hard pressed for a council to not have that go to the vote. And we could find out if there's any interest. We could find out if it requires it or not. Annual revenues, similar to lodging, are very cyclical and unpredictable, subject to recession. That happened. COVID in Ashland decimated food and beverage tax for a period of time. That's not a common, hopefully, event, but that's an example. Smaller revenue stream because of the limited number of food service establishments. And obviously, it may negatively impact businesses and tourism in Coburg that we are. We talked about at the retreat and talked about with Travel Lane County that do we want to negatively impact what we're trying to build and support? So you can probably guess my opinion on that one. Business license fee increase, that might be a smart thing to do. It's very small on the revenue. I think it's worth looking at. It's worth talking about, but it's not much in revenue. I think it's smart to review and be consistent with the region and make sure we're using it correctly, both the data and the funds. Tree fee, I put it in the general fund because it's kind of indirectly assists in general fund. It has some direct application, but the tree fee really resides in the street fund. It's for trees in the right of way. There are trees in the park, in parks that are in the right of way, but are parks trees. It has some benefit to the general fund, and you, depending upon how you draft it up, you could draft it up to where an increase. The base $2 that is current stays in the street fund. The next $2 is for trees in the park, which would definitely be a general fund augmentation. So that depends on how you want to structure that. We often, almost always, not every year, but probably pretty consistently spend more than we bring in on tree trimming, pruning, removal. It doesn't take long. One or two problem trees can wipe out the 1 year's revenue. So I think that's a contender. Again, it's not huge. If you double it, that's $20,000 a year. And if you but it has a nexus, I think. So it's always, I think we lean towards the ones that have a really strong, clear nexus between what you're charging and what you're doing with those funds. So then we get into the staff proposal there of current, the immediate, and then a future. The park, from a staff perspective, park and open space fee of $5 a month is enough to be meaningful to kind of change our trajectory in the general fund. It allows us to maintain a pretty high level of service that the community expects in the parks right now. That's the good and the bad of Brian and team being on top of everything. The expectations stay high or get higher. So I put the justification in the check boxes there. We definitely have increased labor material costs for our existing operations. We have a new park coming. The capital for that is for SDCs, but there's operations and maintenance as soon as that's done. That's about a 15 to 20% increase in land area that we have to maintain. We have an expanded pavilion park and a new restroom. So there's obvious maintenance costs that as soon as that reopens here in May, we start having increased costs, and that park will also have maintenance. We've enjoyed a year of not doing as much maintenance there, but spending capital instead. We'll go back to operations and maintenance later. We have a number of park-specific equipment replacements that need to be addressed. And really the parks budget, and we'll talk about this when we get to the budget meetings, we really need to make sure the parks is paying its true cost share. None of the vehicles are allocated a portion of a vehicle. No vehicles are allocated to parks. The water fund is donating the water to the general fund, which they probably should at least have a wholesale rate as a water business. When we put our water hat on, we shouldn't give our product away. We should at least charge a wholesale rate. So that's something that needs to be looked at. So what we don't have right now is we have an undercount of what the true cost of the park system costs us. Not, maybe not huge, but we need to adjust that and actually make sure we know what the cost of that system is. All of those things, I think, that's from a staff perspective, justify the fee. The bummer part, as we've talked about, is the selling point isn't super great. It's a $5 fee to maintain current service levels. What do you get? You get what you've had, which is great. It doesn't erode, it doesn't go down, but you're not getting anything really added, not getting new. You're getting the ability to have operations and maintenance for 20% more land area pavilion and 100% more land area of the new park, and great service levels for what we've got. The other one is a tree fee increase. Again, I think I've already hit on the justifications there. We spend more than we take in on that already. The tree inventory is an emergency management risk. We experience, it's hard to pin exactly. It's a little anecdotal, but the better job we do there, the less power outages and falling trees in the right of way during storm events and all of that. And I think we can get a little more proactive on it rather than being reactive on citizen inquiries and complaints. We can get ahead of the curve a little bit on tree maintenance. The last slide is a future FY27 plus. So no real, once we have the storm drain master plan done, then on the heels of that is, okay, how do we how do we fund maintaining it? Right now we maintain it out of the street fund. It probably needs to, as we have a master plan and we start talking about storm drain specific infrastructure, which we just installed on the North Willamette project, and we will be installing on Coleman, and the existing work that we have that really is paid for by streets, we should have a storm drain fee to pay for that utility. It's its own utility. We're on the bottom end of the regulatory structure for that for now. That inevitably will dial up. We're small enough of a city, and our outfalls are as limited enough to not be hit with the higher regulatory stuff that larger cities are already facing. But that will come. All cities will have some of that, and we need to be ready for that. And then along with that is a storm drain SDC. You have to have a master plan to be able to have an SDC, and that's a developer paid fee, obviously, but that allows us to have some capital funds to pay for growth of the system. I already mentioned the local lodging tax of 1%. That's I think just a smart thing for us to kind of slow roll and consider and be smart about. And then the diesel tax has been talked about here. And the revenue, of course, is restricted to transportation related. It'd be in the street fund, and we'll have to really research, how much, what our nexus is on diesel, if we have to make any other policy adjustments to make sure we're okay on that. And I didn't correct this. It's 2 to 4 cents, not 2 to 4% on that. So that's the rundown. And the memo that the subcommittee, who of course they're a subcommittee of council, they're all here to discuss it, recommended the same as the staff recommendation for the $5 park and open space fee and a $2 increase in the tree fee. We didn't specify, or the committee didn't specify on the tree fee whether or not, the nuance of having it be $4 to go into the street fund or splitting it. I think we did barely talk about that, maybe getting a little complicated, and maybe it's not worth bothering with that. It still will be spent on the significant tree inventory we have, regardless of how fancy we get with the allocation. So that's not included. The last piece that we talked about, that we also talked about in the utility conversation, is having an index on all of our fees so they don't lose value over time. So fees that are that are driven by people cost would have an index of a CPI, Consumer Price Index. Fees that are mainly capital infrastructure related would typically have the ENR, the Engineering News Record, which is a construction cost index. They track similar but different over time based on different categories that they compile. So that's the rundown. I don't know if that was 15 minutes or not. I just kept going. Yeah. So the process plan is April council meeting, having this in a resolution form for consideration, along with the recommendation of the subcommittee, and debate it, beat it up, and decide which way you want to go. We're doing this in conjunction with the budget, so the budget is being built now. We will build in our revenue estimates with an assumption that this is approved, so we can budget our expenditures appropriately. We can easily, if it is not, it would just be, between the second budget meeting and the council, it would be an adjusted column and highlight the items, the reductions commensurate with the removal of that revenue, which this is a total of approximately $70,000, $50 in the general fund, $20 in the street fund, a $7 a month hit, per utility customer, $84 a year on top of the roughly 80 that we did on utilities. Not insignificant. So
I would just argue that the tree fund should be lumped together, because you might have a major event that took out either the park trees and you couldn't swap the money if you haven't dedicated it differently.
Good point. Yeah, I think I tend to agree that we may be thinking about overcomplicating it, and that gives us more flexibility. You're right, and more of them are in the street right away than in the parks. The volume of the big old trees are really more street right of ways anyway, so that's more likely. So I hit a good downer to finish off the meeting.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, the only other thing that is in the packet is the council liaison appointment. And I left those pretty close to what they've been in last year. The only change Councilor Myers, I put you on the Finance Audit Committee, and Councilor Wells, I moved you to the Heritage Committee.
Sorry, Donnie. Hey, this is gonna be fun.
No, it's both, they both have merit. All of our commissions and committees have merits. So next year we'll plan on juggling this around a little bit more. And Councilor Bowman is on the Lane Transit District. It's not a formal liaison appointment,
Right.
but he's serving on that committee, and I wanted to recognize that. So Demi will get bylaws to everybody and meeting schedules and all of that. All of that will come out, so nobody will be blindsided, and I think that's it. We have a Park and Tree Committee meeting is coming up on the 18th of March, Planning Commission on the 19th. And City Council again on April 8th. Plus we have our work session.
2 weeks from today.
2 weeks from today. So unless there's anything else for the good of the order, I will adjourn the meeting at, let's see, 8:16.
I must have gone over.
Yes.
I knew the answer to that. Yeah.
That was a lot to go through, even on a high.
Well, I did.
But it wasn't an hour. Yeah. So, Lane Act.
What I do.
I'm pretty good up there, but people, but I hear what you're saying.